and welcome to another edition of Potluck, your anything and everything talk and entertainment TV show. My name is Laura Hartman, and I am your host. Today, we're going to be showing part one of a two-part series, which is of an interview with a retired senator and governor of Texas. And we'll be discussing his book, which is called The Grand Duke from Boys Ranch. We're not going to touch on everything in the book, but what we will talk about will definitely keep your interest. So please stay tuned. And again, make sure you tune in next week. And if you missed part one, or if you'd like to see any other shows of Potluck, make sure you go to www.potluck-online.org. And right now, it is with an honor and a privilege to introduce to you the Honorable Bill Sarpalius. Welcome to the show, Bill. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. It's good to be with you.
Yeah, it's nice to have you. Thank you so much for coming on. So we're going to talk about your book called The Grand Duke from Boys Ranch.
So who influenced you to write your book?
A lot of my friends that I grew up with and friends I served in the legislature and in Congress with who knew my story kept encouraging me, you should write it down. You should write that story. And so I finally did. It took me 11 years to write the story. It was a hard book to write. Anybody who reads it will understand that. But then it was published about a year and a half ago by Texas A&M University, and it's done very well. But it's basically my story.
Right. And you have some really great reviews on Amazon.
I do. And it hit the bestseller list on Amazon, and it's done very well. People tell me it's an easy read. It's not, it's not a long book, and it's got a message and a story to it that I hope the reader will enjoy.
Yeah, it has a powerful message. You are definitely a testimony to where, based on everything that you've been through, but you're a testimony to show that when you put your mind to something, you can achieve it. And you definitely surpass that. So why don't you tell the audience about your book? And, you can start from the beginning. Just do it like a brief. You don't want to give away everything about your book.
Well, my story begins as a young boy. I have two younger brothers. I'm the oldest, and as a young boy, I had polio. And because of polio, I was behind in school. My younger brother started school before me, so I had to play catch up as far as an education is concerned. My father left when I was 10. He was in the Air Force. My mother was an alcoholic and suicidal, and couldn't keep a job. So we were living in Houston, Texas at the time, and we became homeless. We lived in vacant houses. We lived off of food that churches would bring to us, or food that we would dig out of trash cans.
Wow.
We quickly learned which restaurants had the best fried chicken and things like that, but we really didn't know there was anything different. But we moved from vacant house to vacant house. We never went to a school, the same school, for an entire year. And finally, it had reached the point where the courts had gotten involved, and some people who knew of Cal Farley. Cal Farley was a man who started a ranch for boys, and he wanted to help the bottom 10%, the kids that nobody else wanted.
So this was like foster care back in,
It's not foster care, it's permanent placement.
Okay.
And when you're placed there, if you're selected to go, there's no cost to the parents or anybody. He raised money publicly to help provide a school and dorms and facilities to help these kids.
Okay.
So I came there when I was 13 years old, was in the 5th grade and couldn't read. I was very tall and skinny because of polio, very shy. I could not even stand up in the classroom and say my name.
Wow.
But, and at the time we came the day after Christmas, and I lived in a dorm with 36 boys, and there were about close to 450 kids that lived there at the time. Half of them had committed violent crimes. At that time, a kid either went to Gatesville through the courts, which was a lockup facility, or the judges would send them to Boys Ranch. And then the other half of the kids were like us, kids who just had no home. So I grew up in that type of environment, which was not an easy environment to grow up in. I tell the story in the book about one time taking a shower and looking at the bar of soap I had, and there was a razor blade embedded in the soap. So you had to constantly be aware of the environment around you. Now, there were some great teachers and great dorm parents, and they helped a lot of kids. Boys Ranch is a success story. They've helped over 7,000 kids that had nothing when they came there.
Wow. Does the Boys Ranch still exist today?
It does. Now, it's a lot different. Instead of dorms, they have homes where they have no more than 8 kids to a home, and it's set up more like a home. They have dorm parents or a couple that lives there, and they can cook their own meals and wash their own clothes. It's a great facility.
When you went to the school with your brother, I know you said that until the age of 10, before your dad left, when you were with your mom, you went from bacon home to bacon home to bacon home, and you didn't really notice the difference. How did you feel about going from that realm to this new school? And did you feel like, how was your self-esteem back then?
Well, of course, we were excited about going to Boys Ranch. They had horses to ride, and I'm 13 years old, and that kind of environment sounded very attractive. The downside was we had to leave our mother.
Yeah.
And of course, we were very, very close to her, and growing up with an understanding of, not a full understanding, but at least seeing it and being involved in alcoholism and a mother who was suicidal. She tried many times to take her life in front of me and my brothers. So we had this huge amount of love for her, but we worried about her. We were concerned about, who's going to look out for her? And that was the number one concern. And she eventually moved to Amarillo, and so we were able to see her every third Saturday.
Oh, wow.
But that was, growing up at Boys Ranch was good. I mean, Cal Farley was extremely wise when he designed Boys Ranch. He knew that most of these kids were behind in school. Very few of them will go to college, but he believed if you could teach them the basics in education, how to read, write, balance a checkbook, and teach them a skill. He had a large vocational program where kids would learn how to be a barber or learn how to cook in the dining hall or work in the meat processing. And we had our own dairy and food processing plant. And
oh, wow.
When I left, we were producing about 80% of all the food we consumed.
Oh, wow.
Now, when I first came there, we lived on what we called train wreck food. Whenever there was a train wreck, they would donate the food to Boys Ranch. So,
wow. So living there was like living on a farm?
Not really. It was a big home. It was, here again, you lived in a dorm with 36 boys. All the ages were spread. So there were a lot of dorms, and you had a competition in sports between dorms, and we had camp outs where kids would go camp out in the summer. It was a good environment for kids like us.
Right.
It had its pluses and minuses, but there were more.
Did the other kids that you're with, did they see those pluses and minuses, or like your brothers?
Yes, growing up there, you don't just go to school together. You live together.
Right.
And so a lot of the guys that I grew up with were just like a brother.
Okay.
You did everything together.
And you had like 6 people to a dorm or more?
We had 36 boys to a dorm when I lived there.
Oh, but the rooms that you had,
yeah, there were 6 boys to a room.
To a room, yeah, okay.
Yeah. And
wow. So it was a bit confined, but I'm sure if you're going from home to home to home, this was like almost like paradise for you, right?
Yeah, you had a bed to sleep in every night. You had 3 meals a day, and you had good teachers, and it was. I felt fortunate.
Right.
Both my brothers and I did. Felt very fortunate that we were sent to Boys Ranch.
Okay, so in your book, you talk about how shy you were. You mentioned that earlier, and how you had to give a speech. So do you want to talk about that?
I was very shy in school. And here again, I was in the 5th grade, and I was asked our teacher had us read a book when each boy stood up and read a paragraph out of a story on a book. And when it came to my turn, I didn't know how to read. And I was older than every boy in that classroom.
Wow.
So it was very embarrassing, and my teacher made a commitment to teach me how to read. And so all the time in school, I was playing catch up. And of course, here again, my younger brother was ahead of me. And my goal was to graduate from high school with him, where we could graduate together. Mm-hmm. I got involved in the Future Farmers of America, which is a great program in high schools that are all over the United States. And being involved in that, you have to say the FFA creed. You have to memorize it and stand in front of your classroom and say that creed. That was extremely difficult for me. But I began to get involved with the FFA. And then my senior year, was involved in sports and a lot of activities like a lot of other kids. But we had FFA Week, Future Farmers of America Week, where the boys in the chapter would conduct the services in church. And so I was asked to give the sermon, which was the first time I ever got up and gave a talk in my life. And I had written this speech down, or this sermon, titled Being Prepared for Death. And it was about salvation. And Cal Farley always came to Boys Ranch every Sunday morning, would stand on the steps of the chapel and shake hands with the boys as they entered the chapel. And that particular Sunday, he had a boy come get me, and I went out there, and I'm holding my piece of paper with my speech, and I'm nervous, and he sees me, and he comes over to me. He says, "Bill, you're going to do just fine." He said, "Look over the tops of all the boys' heads. Don't look at any boy in the eye. Mm-hmm. And save me a seat in the dining hall after the services," which that was a big deal. So right as the services began, he was writing on a piece of paper, and he slumped next to the boy next to him, and he died of a brain hemorrhage.
Oh, no.
And I watched them take him out the back of the chapel, and I knew he was gone, and I knew I couldn't give that talk. So I just got up and spoke from my heart about how much he meant to me and how much he meant to all of us, where he gave us clothes, he gave us a bed to sleep in. When we were hungry, he gave us food. He provided for us. And after church, we went to the dining hall, and of course, not a word was said. And not anybody ate their meal. There was an announcement made that Cal Farley was dead on arrival at the hospital in Amarillo. And so we all went back to our dorms, and I went to my dorm, and I began to analyze myself, that here I was, a 19-year-old senior getting ready to graduate, had no place to go, didn't know what I was going to do with myself. And I just prayed that I could be used in some way to help people. And at that moment, my life changed. And 3 months later, I got off a bus in Amarillo, Texas, with one suitcase, $100 in my pocket, and no place to go.
Wow.
And then the doors began to open for me. And
Now, before the doors opened up, you attempted to find your mother or to help your mother, correct?
I did. I went and stayed with her. And she finally, the worst thing about an alcoholic is once they finally reach that stage where they know that they have a problem and they admit it and they want help. She had reached that point.
Oh, wow.
And so I just believed that we could go to a treatment facility and they would take her and help her.
So prior to this, you never tried to get her, or nobody tried to get her help? So this was like the first turning point?
Back in that time, a lot of alcoholics, unfortunately, were placed in mental institutions.
Right. Where they electrocuted you, probably.
Yeah, and she was placed in a mental institution.
Oh, wow.
And at Texas ranked 50th nationwide. There was not a single facility in the state to help an alcoholic. But we spent the summer hitchhiking across Texas, trying to find a place to help her, and there was none. So we hitchhiked back to Amarillo, and I decided I wanted to go to college and hitchhiked down to a little junior college in Clarendon, Texas, and enrolled and got 6 jobs trying to work my way through school. And I just couldn't make ends meet.
Right. So going back to getting help for your mother, at that time and place, the only place to get real help for people that had alcoholism were people that had to pay out a lot of money, correct?
Exactly.
Yeah.
There were not facilities for people, and usually alcoholics, they lose, a lot of them lose everything. They don't have money.
Yeah.
But I learned a lot about that problem because I was trying to help my mother. And I was determined to try to figure out a way to not only help her, but to help other people who were struggling with that disease.
Right. So you found your way through, you mentioned that you had 6 jobs going to school. You found a college to go to.
Yeah. Did everything I could to make some money. I drove a school bus. I fed hogs for another farmer. I drove a tractor for another farmer. I was a disc jockey in a radio station. I did everything I could. I was a custodian in the church. So somebody told me that if I ran for state president of the Future Farmers of America and got elected, that I would get a full scholarship.
Oh, wow.
So that's what I did. I was one on the district level, and then you compete on a area level, and then you go to the state convention where there's 10 finalists throughout the state. And fortunately, I was elected state president. And as state president, they gave me an automobile, a car, and a credit card. You had to lay out a school for a year. And I spent the entire year traveling Texas, speaking to high school assemblies and promoting the FFA. And so I lived in my car. I had no other home. So that car was my home for a year.
Oh, wow.
But it was a great opportunity to learn the state of Texas, and I did a lot of public speaking. I was able to improve my skill in doing that.
Wow. Okay. So from the experiences that you got from the Future Farmers of America, what happened after that?
Well, I worked my way through school. I went ahead and graduated from college at Texas Tech University. I returned to Boys Ranch and taught school for 3 years, and then spent 2 years helping pick out which kids come to Boys Ranch, which that was the hardest job I ever had.
Wow. Was it difficult to get in? Because I mean, like you were saying earlier, that these kids had either committed crimes or they had no place to go. So was there a big issue back then with a lot of kids? I mean, there still is today.
Well, there's several stories in the book where I tell the story of this one boy who basically slept underneath the school, and his father had a one-room, kind of like a mobile home, but it was a small home with just one bedroom and one kitchen and a living room.
Right.
And this kid had nothing. And I tell the story of not only him, but other boys that I ran into that had no place to go. And unfortunately, at that time, we could only accept 1 out of 17 applicants.
Oh, wow.
So I would go to bed at night, what's happening to the other 16? And that was the hardest job I ever had in my life. And I think the reader, when they read the book, they get some insight of the problems that we have throughout this country on kids that are abused and kids that are homeless, that
Right.
have no place to go.
Right. Because they had been kicked out or they just ran away and couldn't turn back.
Yeah.
Yeah. So when you were teaching and you were doing that, were you mentors to a lot of these boys?
Absolutely. It turned out great because, when I became state president of the FFA, it gave me a lot of notoriety among all the boys at Boys Ranch. It was an accomplishment that all of us shared together.
Yeah.
And I did that for a while, and then I got a call early on a Sunday morning that my mother had committed suicide. And we had talked the night before that happened, and I just felt, we were extremely close.
Right.
But I just felt like something needed to be done.
Right. And you hadn't been able to put her into a place to get her the help.
No.
Because there was no place.
There was no place. So that was the point when I decided to get into politics. I had decided that the only way that issue could ever be addressed is to try to get elected to office and try to do something about it. So I announced as a candidate for the Texas Senate and started my race with $25.
Wow.
Zero name ID, running against an incumbent. So it was a real uphill battle. But the one thing Boys Ranch taught me was how to work and how to work hard. And I designed my own brochure. I just went door to door. I just worked it the old-fashioned way. And that Senate district covered the entire Texas Panhandle. It was a large district. It was 27 counties.
Oh my gosh.
It was bigger than most states.
Yeah. Texas is already big as it is and everything's widespread out.
Yeah. And I was young. I was not an attorney. I didn't have much going for me at the time, but the determination. And I worked at it, and I did my own TV spot. I'd raised enough money where I could do a TV spot. And of course, it's 30 seconds. And I did my own radio spots. And when the TV spot aired, it became so popular that people were calling into the TV station asking when that's going to be run again. Well, I'd only had enough money for 3 spots for it to run 3 times. But the spot did so well that it helped generate some more funds for me to where I could run the TV spot more.
Oh, wow.
And I basically, in the spot, I talked about, growing up at Boys Ranch and how I wanted to address the problems of alcohol and drug abuse. Well, I got elected and I carried every county, all 27 counties.
Wow.
And I went to Austin and I was young. And here again, there's only 31 senators in Texas. All of them but 3 were attorneys. And I remember sitting behind my desk for the first time. I hadn't even been sworn in yet, thinking, "Oh, I'm way above my head." And but I have a lot of faith, and I knew that I was there for a purpose, and I was going to work on that issue.
And did you have anybody? Was there anybody there to kind of like guide you, or was there like a brochure or a booklet to like tell you like this is how you get started and what you do, or did you just kind of wing it?
There was a book that was titled "The Rules of the Senate," and all it was the rules. And I did have some senators that mentored me, that helped me, but it was and. Besides that, as a freshman member, I was a freshman, just got elected. I was appointed chairman of the Agriculture Committee, which agriculture in Texas was a big deal. So not only did I have to try to learn the ropes of being a senator, I had to learn the ropes of chairing a committee.
Wow.
And
Yeah.
put a staff together for that committee and try to learn more about the different issues in agriculture in Texas and how we could help in those issues. And in the book, the reader will read about different issues that were brought to me. One of them is an example where Texas, you could legally run an ambulance out of the back of a pickup truck.
Wow. That just blows my mind.
There were no standards for ambulances, or the ones that owned ambulances were counties and funeral homes.
Wow.
And
Was it a matter of funding, or just they just put the trucks to use?
nobody addressed it. And when I got elected, these doctors came to me and
Thank you again for joining us. I hope you enjoyed this episode of Potluck. And if you're just tuning in, make sure you catch us on the web at www.potluck-online.org. And make sure you stay tuned in for next week's Part 2 interview with the Honorable Bill Sarpalius. So thank you again, and we'll see you next time.